we are looking at punk style image editing or punk style collage. So a lot of the punk work was handmade. So we've really got to sort of work hard to get that sort of aesthetic and that style across in Photoshop. We're going to start with an A3 document. So the same as before, print A3. And if you've not got that, you can go onto this setting and then you'll find it there. I'm going to type this as punk collage. Happy with 300, but you can set it to 4 if you'd rather. We're probably going to print this out, so we're going to go CMYK. And we're good to go. So we've got our A3 document here. Now you should have some resources to work with. So this is my sort of punk folder, and I've got some images of badges. I've got some images of sort of graffiti and textured walls. I've got images of sort of people who are looking rebellious, or people protesting, or people smoking. I've got people performing gigs, so all of this kind of stuff that linked to the punk era. I've got an image of JFK, so it's quite a political movement, so you want some sort of politically motivated imagery to work with. I've also got these 4 paper textures here, so these are really important because we want this to look like it's been made by hand. We want this to look like real bits of cut up and shredded paper, so it's important that we use those. And I've also got a pin, as sort of safety pins were well recognised for being part of the punk image. First thing I'm going to do is take one of my images. So I think I'm going to go with this one of JFK, and I'm going to drop that onto my page here. Now you can see it's got this cross across it, which just means you need to click up there or press enter, and that drops as our image in. Now, punk designers worked a lot on photocopiers. They worked a lot with printed and found materials. So we need to make this look a little bit more older and a little bit less digital, because at the moment it's full colour and it's not quite how we wanted it. So first thing we can do is colorize this. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Hue, Saturation. And I'm going to make this all one colour. Obviously you could go black and white, but I'm just going to go for sort of a shade of one colour. Quite often when punk designers were creating their work, they'd photocopy onto coloured paper, so you get this sort of like coloured image effect. So we're going to click OK on the blue, happy with that. Obviously because they were using photocopiers, they got these sort of grainy, textured images because they were constantly putting it through the photocopier and repeating it, and you were getting this sort of like ink pattern on it. So to recreate that effect, I'm going to do something called a half tone. Now that is in our filter settings, and we want to look for pixelate and halftone. Now at the moment it doesn't do anything, so we've got a max radius of 8 and then it's got all these channels in here, so I'm going to leave it like that. And you can see it gives us this pixelated sort of screen printed kind of effect. So that, I'm happy with that now, so I've got my image there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in one of my paper pieces. Now I think I want this one. I'm going to bring that over the image, and you can see it places it there. Now what this does is it gives us this sort of jaggedy edge to work with. So I'm going to put that jaggedy edge, I think I'm going to rotate it, and I think I actually just want that sort of middle selection. So what I'm going to do is I can do 2 things. So I'm going to magic wand this and select the bit I want. Now if I wanted to cut both of these pieces out, I could hold shift and select them both, and then I could hide them, and you can see it gives me those parts of the image, and I can copy and paste those parts of the image out, and it gives me those separately. Now that's not actually what I wanted to do, because I don't want those bits. I want the opposite of that, so I'm going to delete that layer. I'm going to bring my paper back in. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to select my paper layer, select the paper, hold shift, do that, and then I'm going to do select inverse, and what that does is it flips it. So it says, okay, well I'm going to give you all of this. So I'm going to do that one instead. So I'm going to hide my paper layer. Now you can see actually it's going to give me all of this. Now I'll cut some of those bits out in a minute, but I'm just going to do Command C, Command V out of that layer. There we go. And now you can see it's giving me these bits. Now I don't want all of those bits technically, so I'm just going to go through and use my polygonal lasso, and I'm just going to delete some of those bits out by pressing delete on my keyboard. But you can see I've now got that sort of jaggedy paper effect here. I don't want that bit either. Now to make that look like it's actually been cut out and it's actually physically on paper, we still need to do another thing to it. So we need to add a drop shadow. So I'm going to double click my layer, Open this panel, and then you can see we've got a drop shadow here at the bottom. And now it looks like it's physically coming off the page. Now that's a little bit much for me, so I'm going to take the opacity down to maybe 15. We want this to be quite subtle because this stuff was stuck onto the paper, so it doesn't actually need to look as though it's sort of coming off drastically. I'm going to take the distance down. I've taken my multiply down. You can just play around with these. Again, I'm probably going to want some noise on that, so I want it to feel a little bit gritty, a bit grungy, and just get it into a point where you're quite happy with it. Now that for me feels a bit more subtle, a bit more realistic. You could add a slight stroke to it. So if I had a stroke there, that looks totally fake. But if I go on to this, and again I take the opacity down to maybe 50, see what that looks like. And I've got it a very thin, so I'm going to go for 1 pixel. You can see it starts to make it look a little bit more, so I'm going to take it down a bit more to 25. If I sort of show you what that's done, if I click this preview button and hide that, you can see it just really increases that sort of cut out collage look. So we've colorized the image, so we've gone to image, adjustments and colorize to give it that sort of flat color effect. We've then gone to our filter and applied a color halftone, and we've just gone with the basic settings for that. So that is under pixelate and color halftone, and that gives it that printed effect. And now we've got the paper over the top, which we've used to cut out of that. And then we've added a stroke and a drop shadow. So nice and simple. So we're going to do the exact same thing with another. So I'm going to take this one. And I'll do the exact same thing. So I'm going to go to image, adjustments, hue saturation. And I'm going to pick an opposite colour here. So I'm going to go colorize and then pick something, maybe a yellow. Take it up like that. Take it to maybe there. So we want it to have this sort of faded effect. And then again, I'm going to go to filter, color halftone. Click OK. And that should give us that sort of printed effect. And then drop in one of my paper textures. And I think this time I want sort of like a horizontal strip. So I think I'm going to go for that middle one. So I'm going to make that quite big. Stick that over the top. Make sure I've got the bits I want selected, so if I just hide that, sort of see which bits it's taking. Yep, happy with that. Magic wand. Now this time I do want the bit that it's over, so whereas before we inversed the selection, this time I'm happy with that because that's the part of the image I want. Go to the image that you want that selection from, Command C, Command V, then I'm going to hide that layer, and then you can see I've got this extra layer here which is giving me that cut up, collaged selection. Now, again, to make that a little bit more realistic, I'm going to click on the layer, I'm going to add a bit of a drop shadow and a bit of a stroke to that. And you can see it's already got my settings from last time, so it's just applied the same settings. You want it all to be at the same angle. And you can see I can start to sort of collage these pieces together now. I might add one of my graffiti textures into the background, so I think I'm going to go with that one. I'll make that quite big. I'm going to stick this in the background so it looks like almost a wall that's got loads of different collaged pieces and ripped up things on it. Now, again, I might change the colour of this. So for me, that's too sort of overly coloured. So I'm going to make it quite dark. I'm going to colorise it. And that gives it a bit of sort of contrast. And go for it, I think a purple. Like that. So again, in punk design, we're sort of going for these clashing, bold, contrasting colours. I could make that darker. I could set it on a black background. See if I added a black background in here. And I use my paint bucket tool to fill that. And then I could set this layer to one of these blend modes and see what that does. Now obviously we've got quite large images in here, so you can see it's starting to stress out a little bit with those. So that one looks quite good, that one there, so that's quite interesting. So now we're starting to get somewhere. I might just make that a little bit opaque because it's a little bit strong for me. That's more like it. So again, we're starting to create these interesting contrasting collages. I might add my pin in here. I might add a couple of badges. So you can see that's already on a transparent background. So if I wanted that to look as though it had been sort of attached and it was, you know, pinning these two pieces together here, or pinning this to the background, nice and easy, I can just rasterize this layer and I can rub out that part there and that, and then you can see it looks like it's going in. I could also go to my paintbrush tool and go for a normal sort of brush effect, so a very general sort of brush effect. I want to go quite small and I just want it to be in black, and I could on that same layer just add that sort of darker area like that. Now obviously that's a bit too black, so I probably want to have taken the opacity down of that. But you can see it just starts to make it look as though it's been pinned. I could also add one of my badges and I could cut one or two of these out. So I could pick the one that I want to go for. Now again, these are quite politically motivated things. You want to use your magnetic lasso because we've got something curved, so I might go for this one. Now remember, if you're using the magnetic lasso, click every now and again just to keep it in line, just to keep it on the right path. Obviously we've got a black background here, so that makes things quite easy because there's very high contrast. Drawing that up, and then I'm going to Command C, Command V, hide that, and then I could place that over my image somewhere. Again, I could add a drop shadow to that to make it look like it's actually on the image. Place it down there somewhere. And a stroke. And there we go. So we're starting to build up this sort of layered, contrasting background. So you want lots of ripped elements using those paper sort of templates. You want lots of imagery going on, so lots of stuff brought together. You want to have a go at putting these sort of badges and these graffiti textures on there. It doesn't have to be sort of a whole layer. You could just do it in sections using that paper collage. But there we have it. So there we have the beginnings of a punk style collage.